Excellent. There we go. And welcome to the podcast Corner of Special Education. My name is Karsten Skrulle Gundersen, and I wish you a most warmly welcome to my Corner of Special Education. Today is the International Day of Mathematics, and in that regard, you will in this episode hear my conversation with Louise Pennington from Oxford Press, where we talk about Numicon. I myself have used Numicon for some years, and I wanted to learn more about the background, method, etc. During the conversation with Louise, I gained more knowledge about Numicon, but also other ways to teach math, and hope that you as a listener do too. With that, here's my conversation with Louise Pennington. I would like to welcome to the podcast, Corner of Special Education, and a new episode in the series Let's Talk About. And as the title of the episode indicates, today's topic is Numicon. And as always, I have a guest with me. Again, I'm quite thrilled because this is mainly a podcast in Norwegian, and as you as a listener can hear, today's episode is in English, and I'm always excited to do an English episode. But Numicon, what is Numicon, and how to use this in the daily practice? And to learn a bit more about Numicon, I have a guest with me, and before you give a short introduction about yourself, I would just like to say welcome to the podcast and thank you for taking the time. And before we started the recording, you were telling me a little bit about how you or when you started to use Numicon. And before we get more into that, why don't you give a short presentation of yourself?
Thank you, Karsten. So, hello, I'm Louise Pennington. I am the Head of Professional Development at Oxford University Press. The press is a department of Oxford University, and we are one of the largest and oldest university presses in the world. So our aim is to improve the lives of children through producing excellent resources, and one of those is Numicon. So before I worked for the press, my background was in primary education. So I'm a primary teacher. I used to lead on the provision for special educational needs in my school, and was also part of the senior leadership team. And I was a lead maths teacher. I found maths hard as a child myself, and so I was really keen to be the best teacher of mathematics that I could be. And so part of that was, exploring and finding resources that would help children to be better at mathematics. And then after that job, I went to work for our local authority, so the area in which, that controls the schools and civic things. And I was a specialist teacher for maths difficulties. I have a master's degree in special educational needs and postgraduate certificates in maths difficulties. So it's something that's always been of interest to me. Why and how children find maths difficult and what teachers can do about that. And so part of that quest is how I found Numicon and, started to work with children. And then when I worked with wider schools to try and support the schools to assess children, to support their teachers in programs that would help their children to pick up some of those really, really important early math skills so that they could kind of experience success and be better at maths and enjoy it. I think that's really important for me, is that children enjoy mathematics as well.
Well, thank you. And before we get to, more about the topic of Numicon, because I haven't, this is the first episode where the topic is mathematics, and since you are a math teacher and have a lot of experience on that area, also including special education within mathematics, what would you say? You said that to provide motivation and enjoy um, mathematics as a topic, as a theme in school. But what do you think is important when teaching maths, both to those who are in need of special education and those who are not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, one of the most important things when we teach maths is to um, make sure children enjoy the subject. So give them chance to explore, not always be focused on the answer, but focused on children's thinking and how they're exploring an idea. Um, yeah, the process, and also focus on children being curious and interested. And so I think often presenting them with a picture or with a scenario where, what's the same and what's different here, or what do you notice, means that children start to think a little bit more and start to look and to notice and to pick out patterns or and I think that's really important for me, that we don't always give children pages and pages of arithmetic to do. There's a lot, and I think one of the key things for me in children's enjoying and engaging in maths is giving them time to talk and to communicate together with teachers or with their peers, and to explore those things physically. So to do the maths, not just hear about the maths, look at the maths, to do it themselves. And I think when children experience success, it motivates them to try again and to try harder. So I think as a child, I didn't see myself as a mathematician. I found it really difficult. I wasn't very quick, but I had really good logical thinking. I saw patterns, and I didn't realise that that was part of maths. I thought maths was about numbers and getting maths questions correct. And I think that was, is a mistake if we treat maths like that for children.
Mm. And for those who listen to this episode and are in a role as a parent, when they are experiencing problems or troubles with helping their kids doing homework in math, do you have any or any idea for how to do that?
Yeah, and I think there's two parts to this. One thing for me is that children's homework should be something that they can already do. It shouldn't be new maths. Otherwise, we're leaving the parents to do the teaching, and it might not be easy. So that's one. And the second is it should be enjoyable for everybody. So I think that for me is really important. And we've done a lot of work with Numicon to provide homework ideas that are interesting and enjoyable for family members, so they have that positive experience at home for mathematics. And one of the key things for me around parents with maths is that we are, particularly I'm thinking of myself here because I found maths difficult, that I don't want my children to think that maths isn't important or that it was different for me but it didn't matter. I persevered, I really tried hard, and I made myself do more maths when I found it difficult, which I know is hard. So I think there's lots of research that shows that if parents express a negative attitude towards maths because of their own experiences, that affects their children's performance. I think one thing is to be positive about it, and I think schools should make sure that what they're sending home is something parents can be positive about, and it's not too difficult, so they don't end up in a negative situation at home where the child is stuck and the parent doesn't know what to do with that. And I think as well.
I know. Yeah.
I was just saying that I think schools need to trust parents as well. I think that particularly for us in England, we trust our parents a lot with reading at home. The children go home with reading books, and the parents are trusted and expected to do that. And sometimes schools think that parents might say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing around the mathematics. So I think it's both, that parents need to be positive about it and confident, and that schools need to make sure that what they send home allows the parents to do that.
Right. And as you say, it doesn't just relate to the task and homework in math. It goes for both in social science and math, and the all of the other tasks and homework
Yeah.
in now you mentioned Numicon, and that is the topic of today's talk and episode. And now, what is Numicon, and what is the story idea behind?
So what is Numicon is a really interesting question, because most people think Numicon is the plastic shapes. And it is the plastic shapes, but also it's an approach to teaching mathematics. And within that, we have teaching materials, we have lessons and materials for teachers, we have the Numicon pieces, and we also have online materials, so digital. We have interactive whiteboard software and lots of digital things. So it's quite a big thing. And the approach to teaching maths for me is what Numicon is. So Numicon is about communicating mathematically. So everything from giving shared attention, so a child, looking at something the teacher's giving them, through to, being engaged in an activity, showing their thinking by using Numicon, and then also talking. So everything that a child can do in terms of showing they're engaged in something, that's really central to Numicon. So it's actively doing the maths. We also really advocate for exploring of relationships. So looking for patterns, making connections between something they know already and some new learning. So, what do I know that might help me here? So we're exploring those relationships, and we're using that to connect learning. So for me, in the 15 years that I spent assessing and working with children who find maths difficult, some of whom had other special needs and some of whom didn't, one of the key things was that a lot of them have little tiny pockets of knowledge, but they're not joined up. So they know a little bit about some maths, but it isn't joined to anything else. And so if we start to look for relationships and explore those, children can join their learning up a little bit more, and so they do know more. And the last one is generalizing. So it's communicating mathematically, exploring relationships, and then generalizing. So that is really about, what are the rules here? How can I use what I know in a different situation? So I think it's really important that children can learn something and then use it, and then link the maths ideas to it. So that's Numicon, really. It's the pedagogical approach, if you like. And also, we don't just use the Numicon pieces. We use things like Cuisenaire rods. We use baseboards and overlays. A lot of manipulatives within the Numicon that isn't just the plastic shapes. However, you asked about how it came about. So Numicon started as a research project. So it was a project that was led by Dr. Tony Wing. He had some funding from the Teacher Training Agency back in the 1990s. And he worked with a head teacher and a teacher in a school, so Rowan Mitacon and Ruth Atkinson. And they were really looking at, why is maths difficult? What is it that children need them to kind of explore those maths ideas?
Now, as I said, I first discovered Numicon, say maybe 3-4 years ago, and I see that just in my experience, I have only worked with Numicon with pupils in need of special education. But would you say that you can work with Numicon for both groups?
Absolutely, yes. I think like you, I found Numicon because of wanting to support children with special needs. However, that was when I was teaching. So my head teacher said, you can have some, but you have to prove that it's doing a job. You have to prove that it's working. So within 18 months, we had that through school because we found the impact of it to be so huge, not just for the special needs children, but for everybody. And so I think one of the great things that Numicon does, it supports teachers to be able to scaffold the learning and support the children with maths difficult, but it also is helpful to stretch and to challenge the children who find maths easy, I guess. And so it does everything. And actually, it's used in England, it's used in secondary schools as well. So whilst we have teaching materials that go from like age 3 to age 11 for UK schools, we have a little bit of an intervention program for secondary, and some secondary schools use it all the way through to like children to be 14 or 15. And not just for special needs. I have some wonderful activities that take children up into really complicated algebra using Numicon.
Interesting. Now, you often can say that if you design teaching for dyslexia or in a classroom for in a more narrow way, you are able to reach in a more broader way, if you understand what I'm trying to. But like, would you say that that if you at Numicon it's a more narrow way to teach, or is
so
it's a broader way?
I think it's both. It depends how you use it. So for us, for English curriculum, and we've also done a lot of work for the PYP curriculum and Scottish curriculum and Welsh. So we know that Numicon fits with other curriculums. It's used a lot in New Zealand as well. And so it can be used to support all teaching for primary age children, but it does also a particular really good job for children who find the maths difficult. So where you've got small steps, really focused, tight learning, particularly around number and number relationships and calculation, then it does a really, really good job there in a really structured way. So I think it does both. It does both a narrow curriculum and really tight way of working for children, but also, you can use it for everything. And I think that's one of the difficulties sometimes with Numicon is teachers don't understand exactly how you can use it for some of those more difficult concepts like fractions or decimals or percentages, but you can use it for those things. And so I think one of the things, to go back to what you said around children with special needs, are for young children. So Numicon was designed to be really bright and colourful to attract children to wonder about, what is this resource? How can I use it? And you will know, having used Numicon for a couple of years now, that the colours are bright and it's set into 2 groups. So the even numbers are all cool colours, shades of green. Odd numbers are all warm colours, purples, reds, yellows. And that's important because colour is a really helpful memory aid for children. And so it's bright, so it attracts them in. And then the properties of the numbers, so the number values and things around the numbers, you can see with Numicon too. So, and also you'll see the odd numbers have got the bit that sticks up. So, all the odd numbers have the little hat or the chimney thing at the top. And so children understand that those are the odd numbers. And that's really helpful because you can see the why. So one of the things that I found hard with maths was, why do I need to do that? Or why do I follow that rule? What does it do? And so I think one of the things that you learn as a child is when you add 2 odd numbers together, it makes an even number. But if you don't have something like Numicon, you can't prove it. But we can, because we can see that 2 odd numbers added together make another pair. You can see why it makes the pair. So I think what it does is it proves the things, it proves the rules, and it allows children to see and to understand what happens when you combine numbers, or what happens when you take something away. And so I think it demystifies, it makes it real. And so children can really, I understand that because I can see it and I've done it myself.
I can feel it, and I can see it. I can use my senses to explore.
So I think that's really important as well.
Now, before we started the recording and doing our emails before the recording, you asked me if the recording would be done
Yeah.
in audio and video. And now I'm quite, I always do a recording in both because you, as I said, explained, the video is primarily for social media and that. But since Numicon is such a
Yes.
visual aid, uh, see- it's, to sit here and for those who listen to the episode, you are, it's, well, it's, I think it's a good thing that we also have the video recording. So I will do some posts with
Yeah.
with some video, so that people can see what Numicon is all about in a visual way. But why is, you have said now something about why Numicon is designed as it is, but why is it called Numicon?
Number icon. Yeah. So Tony, and we still speak to Tony, who is, is the father of Numicon, really, and he is such a bright and able mathematician, and I think that he was, the name for Numicon was about a number icon, so it represents numbers, it's real, and children can have it and hold it in their hand. So yes, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah.
I would say. Well, you have explained a little bit about who Numicon is intended for and how to use it, and why it's designed in the way it is, related to colors and forms. But why would you say that Numicon is more?
Yeah, that's another good question. I think it's a good apparatus, a good manipulative to use. We've said some of it already. Children are able to hold it and understand the concept of number. So if I hold up a Numicon 5-piece, I can see it's red and it's a warm colour, so that's an odd number. But I can see how it's made up. It's made up of 2 and a 2 and a 1, or a 4 and a 1. And so we can see how numbers are made. And when we put them in order, so if you put them in order from 1 to 10, you get like a staircase pattern. You will have seen it if you've laid it out. And so that really shows children visually, and as you've said, in a tactile way, in a kinesthetic way,
Yeah.
how the number system works. So it works in ones. So you can put a 1 on the number and it makes the next one. So if I put a 1 on the 5, it makes the 6. You add 1 to each number. So it shows the children that the number system is made up in ones, that the pattern goes odd, even, odd, even, odd, even, and they can see it and they can experience that and they can prove it. And they can learn all about what happens when you combine numbers. So I think it really just makes the number system visible. And then when we understand that, we can then start to change, okay, well, what if the blue 10 shape becomes 100? Or this one would be 50, this red 5 becomes 50. And also if that blue one was 1, then this would be half, or, 0. Yeah, so I think there's lots of ways in which you can use it. But it just makes it visible and real, and children can start to explore those number relationships, which is really important, I think. And also helps them to make connections. So if I add 5 and 2, I can also add 0.5 and 0.2. So, so I think they can see it's the same action. So it allows them to store in their memory similar things together. So that's a really good reason why it works. But also for really young children, so like if you work in a kindergarten or in a nursery, and you can put Numicon in the sand or in the water, or have you seen the large foam shapes? We've got a really big set that they can go outside, they can go in water, and so children can, post things through the holes. And so it's just about curiosity and exploring and seeing how they would fit together. So I think, it's useful for all those things, and it works because, as we've said, children are curious about it. It gives them the structure of the number system. They can start to link ideas together. So it just works. It just works.
It just works. Now, I think that in what you were describing now, it also answers how to use Numicon as a
Yeah.
manipulative and use in different ways. But and for and especially for and again, it's a more narrow way to teach the broader group of pupils. You can take it outside. You can use it with the different elements, and so it's a great way to
Yeah.
mix up the teaching from both doing the more the typical worksheets, and to maybe have a kind of teaching in stations and different
Absolutely.
groups, and to and to just this time
Yeah,
more
yeah.
active
And I
way
think
of
with
teaching.
Numicon
Yeah.
as well, we would never say that children always need to use the plastic pieces. So we would say that, have you heard of the concrete pictorial abstract approach? So it's a little bit like the work of Brunner in the 1960s. So that
Yes.
children have to experience the learning and then they can start to visualize it and draw it and write things down. And then they work in the abstract, which is, for us, it would be,
Mhm.
pure calculations or formulas. And so Numicon works on that basis that children experience things first, and then we can start to work on, what it looks like on paper or drawing or diagrams and things like that, jottings, and then moving into the abstract or seeing that as a circle. So sometimes you could start with the abstract. What does this number 5 mean? And then unpicking it. But I think that for us is really important, the way that children experience their learning, and that we would advocate for moving through so that children can internalize those experiences, that they have done it themselves, they've talked about it, they've experienced it, they've worked collaboratively with their peers, and so they understand it better, and so they start to put it in their memory, and then they can start to use it purely when they're doing the worksheets or when they're doing their pencil and paper work, because they have all the images inside their head because they've done it themselves, in a concrete way with manipulatives.
Excellent. Now, for those who have listened to earlier episodes of the podcast, they know that the two last questions are more irregular ones, and it's we are not there yet, but I'm just mentioning it. What do we want the listener to take home from this conversation, and a tip of the day? I'll just to mention those. But we have talked about what is a manipulative, but could you, when speaking of that topic, could you mention other things we can use as a good
Yeah.
manipulative in teaching maths?
Yes. So obviously, a manipulative is a concrete or real object that children can move around that helps their learning and understanding. So anything that teachers have in their classrooms that children can use to explore a maths idea would be a manipulative. One caveat, so one thing that I ask teachers to really be careful of is dual representation. So, for example, if you work with young children and in your classroom are the small world figures people, and if you're using those
Mhm.
for, say, adding or taking away, then we are using those in play in small worlds, so like they are people there. And then when we
Yeah.
do maths, they're actually counting items. And also they distract the children so they'll start playing with them. And so I think, they have to be careful with that. And one of the things that people ask me is like, oh, well, children just play with it. They don't do the maths with it. And so for me, if you give children an opportunity to play and then we start using them regularly, those manipulatives will be used correctly because children have already played with them and they know how to use them. I think so anything. So as I mentioned before, Cuisinart rods, counters, pegs, glass beads, natural objects, so things like leaves or pine cones or pebbles
Yeah.
and stones. Basically, anything can be used as a manipulative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
if parents are listen to your podcast and wonder, well, what about at home? Buttons, coins, anything, pasta, pieces of pasta, anything that children can,
Great.
can make patterns with or can use
Yeah.
for counting or doing their maths is a manipulative. And it's just about being careful
Yeah.
with, yes, that's pasta and we eat it, but we're using it for our maths work today. So just so the children understand that we're using it differently.
And as we know, when you can say that it's lots of math within the
Yes.
cooking.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
yeah.
during COVID,
Now,
Carsten, I wrote some blog pieces for our Oxford education blog, which were for parents and how they could do maths at home. And it was things like cooking recipes, looking how long it takes to do something, spotting things in the environment, how many birds can we see, just using day-to-day activities, going on a walk, which direction we've moved, playing board games. There's lots and lots of ways, as you know, that we use and refine our math skills just in day-to-day life. And so I think, parents how many times can we throw the ball to each other and we're counting? There's lots and lots of ways in which we can.
and there's
Yeah.
opportunities. Yeah. Now, when it comes to Numicon and what you have been describing in what Numicon is and how to use it and the universe of Numicon, is there because now we talked about the different manipulatives and how to use it. Is there anything that you would like to add to that that talking points?
Yeah, so I think what probably would be nice to add is the fact that to use Numicon to support children with special needs or to use it as an intervention, that we have produced in English intervention programs. So we have intervention programs that schools can use with assessments built in. So I think one of the key things about supporting maths learning, if children find it difficult, is knowing where the gaps are in what a child understands and do. And sometimes they are lower down than we think. So they could start in like really early maths. And so I think it's about unpicking that and looking at how we do that. So Numicon has done that already. And it's been, we've had research projects that prove that works for children. So it's just to flag that up, that we do have programs that, that schools can use for that. And also I think for me, just to flag up the fact that if a teacher needs to be confident themselves, and they need to understand what Numicon can do and how it can be used. So that when we do use the manipulatives and we do use it in teaching, that the children are seeing exactly what the teacher wants them to see. So I think we need to make sure we're using the right manipulatives, because sometimes Numicon does a great job, and other times Cuisenaire rods, for example, might show that concept in a little bit clearer. So it's just picking the right one.
Yeah, correct. Now, on your website, you ask how can you best use manipulatives to deepen understanding? Could you elaborate?
Yes, this is something that I'm working on a little bit at the moment, Carsten. So the Numicon publishing team and me as the professional development lead, we're doing a lot of work at the moment around oracy. So a child speaking and thinking and recording, like a mathematician, and how that level of talk and language, coupled with Numicon manipulatives, where is the power in that? And so I think one of the things that's become very apparent to me is that when children are using Numicon, for example, and they have really carefully thought about opportunities to talk and to use manipulatives, that the teacher, has set up that really carefully, that really supports the children's understanding and also their remembering. So when they have done it and they've used the language really carefully and they've talked and listened to other people, and that's enhanced what they understand and know, that is really powerful, and it helps children to remember and to store that with similar ideas in their memory. And so there's a lot of power there in terms of the use of manipulatives to do the maths, and then layered on with the talk and the vocabulary and the opportunities to work with other children means that we have much deeper understanding, that we have less errors and misconceptions, and that children can have stored it in a place in their memory where they can get back to when they need it. So I think that, so they've committed it to long-term memory because they understand it and they can store it in the right place. So there is a lot of power in that, doing the maths with manipulatives and talking and listening at the same time. Then it's a really powerful combination. So we're just working on some new Numicon resources now where we've worked on this for about a year now. So we'll have something for teachers that will give them what's the same and what's different, so opportunities for talk, and then the teacher can model something and the children will do it with their partner or with a group. And so we're working on that at the moment. That'll be ready in the autumn term for teachers. So that's something we're really excited about.
Yeah, I can understand that, and I would say that when you are further down the road and in that line of work, you are more than welcome back to talk
Excellent, thank you.
with those resources. Yeah. Now, I was just thinking about because as you said, you have been working in some years with a Numicon, and I would like to the feedback you have received from teachers and parents and schools using Numicon. Could you tell us a little?
Yeah, of course. That's something that's really important to us that we often ask teachers. So we had a research survey done a few years ago where something like 95% of teachers said that Numicon had a positive impact on their children in their classrooms. That it's in 97% of schools in the UK. And parents. So I particularly speak to parents quite a lot, and a lot of parents. We have a lot of free resources for parents as well on our Oxford Owl website, and so parents really enjoy using Numicon. They tell us that it's easier for their children at home if they want to work with them. They can find more fun ways to do maths at home rather than just do worksheets, as you've said. And that's really important for us as well. A lot of parents do buy Numicon. They do use it at home, and I've seen some wonderful, inventive ways in which parents are using that at home. We get lots of love for Numicon. We get a lot of positive feedback, not just in the UK but around the world. We have a lot of. We often see posts on social media. I spend 10, 15 minutes. I try and do that every few days to look at Numicon, people with the hashtag Numicon, and there's a lot of love and a lot of really good work that goes on, and some brilliant feedback. And so for us, thinking of another layer of feedback, so where we have research projects. So we had one a few years ago where we just looked at the intervention element of Numicon, and it was in a big research project where there were lots of other interventions being looked at across the UK. And it was Numicon intervention program was the only one that had a statistically significant impact on the children. So that was great for us. Last year we did a small research project, but we're just scaling it up now a little bit bigger, where we worked with childminders. So I don't know if you have them, but they are people who work in their home, and they have other children from parents will drop their children off there. So they're young children, preschool children. So we work with some childminders and some nursery settings, so like kindergarten settings, with 4-year-olds. And we wrote some new Numicon activities for really young children. And we got the most amazing feedback from that. And we're just doing a little bit of a bigger project now, which will start in September with a larger group, not huge, about 30 odd, different settings where we're doing the same thing just to see what the impact is. So yeah, we are very keen on finding the impact and picking up on feedback, and quite often customer feedback and parent feedback makes us think about how we can improve the resources further.
understandable. And well, and concerning your feedback and all the positive feedback, I can imagine that you must be quite thrilled about that. Now, I can. You have been talking a little bit about um, the smallest children in kindergarten, and as we all know that um, the way of teaching in kindergarten and the earlier years of school, it's more based on different kind of uh, well plays
Yeah,
and a more active way of teaching. And in that way, I can absolutely see that Numicon is a great way and a great
yeah.
way of teaching. Uh, Now, you have talked a little bit about what lies ahead, and could you give us more of a glance into the future?
Yeah, so I think for us, we Numicon is a loved brand. You know, it's something that it's known across the world, and for us, it's really important that it continues to be used and to be loved. So we're always working on it and improving it. So one of the things is we are working on, as I mentioned before, Numicon Essentials. So we have just looked at how schools might want to just do a little bit of Numicon, not just use it for everything. So we've worked on that. That's coming out. We're also working with a parent organisation at the moment, not just for Numicon, but just thinking about, as we've just mentioned, homework activities, what schools can
Yeah,
do to make maths more positive between home and school. And so that we've got that going on as well. And we're doing a lot of work which does include Numicon on oracy, as I mentioned. So talking for maths and how manipulatives and
yeah.
our teaching materials can feed into that, so schools can really develop those talking and thinking skills in mathematics for children.
Now we are at the end of our list, and we have the two remaining talking points and questions. Now, from this conversation, what do you want the listener to take home from this
I
conversation?
would really hope that people listening would get a sense of the fact that maths needs to be engaging and fun for children, and that they need to experience success. That's something that's really important for me, and that Numicon has a place there to do that. That would be something that I think that I would hope people would take from our conversation.
Excellent, thank you. And do you have a tip of the day in a website or a podcast or
Yes,
anything?
yes. So as I mentioned, the Oxford Owl website, I think that is
Yeah,
there is while schools and parents can both access that site, there's a lot of free Numicon things on there. So that's something that I would definitely point people to, both teachers and parents, to look at the Oxford Owl website. And I think my final tip, particularly because we've talked a lot about special needs, is that if a school is going to use Numicon for children with special needs in a small group or one-to-one, that they also make sure that those materials are available in the classroom as well. Children aren't just
yeah,
accessing something in isolation, that it's readily available in their classroom. Yeah, and that
absolutely.
teachers really
Yeah,
think about
yeah,
not making that clear that it's a special needs teaching resource, because it isn't. So it's the ethos of the classroom needs to support children to use
yeah,
manipulatives, not just when they're stuck, but also to prove their thinking or to try something more difficult. Or, so I think it's about the classroom being accepting of the use of manipulatives, and a child doesn't feel like they're failing if they want to or have to go and use those bits of equipment.
correct, correct. Well, thank you. And always alongside when an episode is published, I'm also publishing a post
Yeah,
on the blog where the websites and resources that are mentioned in talk. I'll list up the links, and so that it's
brilliant.
easier to find. And but with that, Luis, again, thank you very much for taking the time. We are at the end of our list, and for me, from my own practice, I see that I have it's been very well. You have provided a lot for both me and hopefully also for the listeners of the podcast in how to use Numicon in the everyday teachings in math.
Thank you, Carson. Thanks for the opportunity, and it's lovely to meet you. Thank you.
That concludes this extra episode. But before our ways part, remember to follow the podcast on Spotify, where you listen to podcasts. Also, remember to follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Also, if you want the latest news and posts from the blog, you can sign up to the newsletter from spaceblog.no. If you have any comments or want to get in touch, don't hesitate to send me a PM or email at caution@spaceblog.no. As always, I really appreciate if you rate, share and recommend the podcast. Finally, thank you to all of you who have listened to this episode, and a warm welcome to new listeners and followers. And a special thanks to Louise for taking the time to join me for this episode. I hope to meet you again in the next episode of Corner of Special Education. Until then, take care.